Howie Jacobson, thank you so much for joining us again on the Plant Trainers podcast.
What a pleasure to see your beautiful shining faces.
Welcome back. This is exciting. Looking forward to this conversation.
Me too.
Do you have a moment of gratitude that you want to share with us?
I do. And it's counterintuitive for me because I was walking on the road yesterday. I live in a rural community in North Carolina, and I just wanted to kind of get away from my desk. I was stuck with some writing, and I'm walking up and down and I'm listening to a book on tape, a novel. And all of a sudden there's all this traffic, like weirdly, like, 2 p.m. on a Thursday. There's trucks, there's cars, there's lines of them. And every time one goes by, I can't hear my book on tape. So I have to like switch it off on my earbuds. And I'm finding myself getting annoyed. And then I started like feeling like really agitated, like unfair, like what's going on, like pity, self-pity. And in that moment, I kind of like took a breath and remembered everything. And I'm like, oh, wow, like I get to take a break in the middle of the day. I don't have to ask my boss. I don't have to walk around the lobby of an urban office building. I get to be outside. I get to do my thing. And the fact that there are cars going by kind of highlights the fact that almost never are there cars going by, that I have this beautiful, bucolic place. And so it was actually gratitude for the annoying traffic, like to kind of remind me that whenever I'm annoyed by something, it's because there's something that I have that I value that is somehow being interrupted in some kind of small way. So like that was the moment of gratitude. It was like, thank you, cars and trucks and exhaust. Like you remind me of how good I usually have it.
It's hard to have those cues to get you to remember to be grateful, right? Like a lot of people, for me, gratitude first thing. I always say gratitude before my feet hit the floor, right? Like think about all the things that I'm grateful for and before you go to bed. But yeah, to have that out of the blue cue to think about those things is huge.
Yeah, and the morning practices are great. Can I use colorful language on this podcast? I can't remember.
It's a family show.
Okay, well then we'll use the word cow instead. I asked a group of people that I'm involved in a sort of mentoring mastermind group with, what are their gratitude practices? And one of the guys is about 15 years older than me. And so I was very interested, and he's very upbeat. And his gratitude practice is he wakes up in the morning and he says, holy cow, I get to live another day.
Right.
There you go. Yeah.
Low bar. And yet, yeah, like sleep is weird, I go away. I don't know if I'm gonna wake up. Like, yeah, sweet.
And then you could extend that, and my arms are working and my hands are working and my legs are working, because I mean, in the health coaching business, you experience people who don't have that ability, right? People who can't put their shirt on and off themselves. Sometimes they need people to do it for them. So just to have, to wake up in the morning and still be able to lift your arms is something that most people don't think about, but it really is a gift.
It's really funny you say that, because as since I asked these people about it and they gave me their morning rituals, I was thinking, oh, and so this is, for your Jewish listeners, there's the prayers to say in the morning that are like a list of basically metaphorical or real, like, thank you for letting me breathe another day. Thank you for giving me the hearing to hear the rooster crow so I can get up. Thank you for making me stand upright. And I can't remember how to put on tefillin, and I don't know if they're, they're probably made of leather, so they're not vegan. But the idea of like that morning ritual kind of like slapped me in the face. Like it made kind of sense in a way that it never did when I was just doing it, just because you're supposed to do it.
And it's funny that the more you do practice that, the more aware you become to everything around you. And you can be grateful for so many more things just because of that small awareness that comes to light as you make it a routine. It's just interesting the way that works.
Yeah. And I found with some of my coaching clients that, gratitude, you can kind of come off when you're preaching gratitude as like a little bit moralistic. And and I found that with some of my coaching clients that a gratitude practice actually helped them stop binging, because it's sort of like gratitude is the opposite of entitlement. And when people are binging, like the strong physical internal sensation is that of like, I need this, I want this, this is mine. Right. And like even like an inch of gratitude in there somehow is able to like, oh, like I'm not entitled, like I get to have this. I'm not entitled to it. And it kind of takes the edge off that manic need to consume.
Or you're grateful for the choice to be able to consume it or not consume it, where some people don't have the food to consume, period. And here you are with the food in front of you, and you do have the ability to choose not to partake in it. And there's power in that. And a lot of times it does come back to power and feeling in control.
I always loved the perspective of I have to do that versus I get to do that. It makes such a difference. Like I have to drive my kid to his practice. No, I get to do that. It's a privilege. It's exciting. It's such a great opportunity for so many great things to happen. So it's a good flip. You know, I have to I get to.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I find when I offer that to my coaching clients, 90% of the time they're grateful. And 10% they kind of push back. No, I really have to. And I've stopped trying to convince them, but I'll offer them a linguistic shift. I'll say, I have to do this in order to. So at least it'll be like, if I've got an article that's due this afternoon, like, yeah, I get to do it. But at this moment, like I have to do it. Like I made a commitment. But then if I say, well, I have to do it in order to be in integrity, then that kind of takes the bite out without me then, having to like a step too far into like, oh, this wonderful opportunity to pay my taxes,
Yay, I get to give the government more money. Exactly. But, I get to earn the money to then be able to pay. Anyway. Yeah, it's always such a wonderful conversation with you, and such a deep conversation. You've been on episode 109 and 189. Is that all? Only two? I feel like it's more. One of them was actually it was two parts. We did a two-part one in 2016, and then of course we did the group one in Marshall, Texas, when we were still going to Marshall, Texas for Health Fest. And we had such a great roundtable happening there. And I still have the picture of, who was it? You and Adam and this guy, Adam, and Sid. Sid, Garza Hillman, all of you heads facing one direction, and the picture of the back of all your heads, because everybody else kept tapping you guys on the shoulder, not knowing who was going to turn around, thinking that they were talking to one person and it's a completely different person.
So we have good haircuts. You
do have good haircuts. Do you ever get on social media or people telling you that you look like Johnny Sins? Do you ever get that?
Yesterday I was on a podcast. The guy told me that I sounded like Nicolas Cage.
Oh,
interesting.
That's impressive.
I can't hear that, but now I just want to try to imitate him.
What microphone do you have? Maybe you've got a good microphone.
Let's be on this podcast together.
That's good.
So we will link to those other episodes if people want to hear back to everything we talked about back then at planttrainers.com. But why don't you give anybody new to you, which I don't think there are too many people new to you, but if there are, give us a little bit of a synopsis of how you came into the plant-based lifestyle.
Yeah, so I accidentally read Diet for a New America by John Robbins. It was in 1990. It was about, I'm gonna say, a week and a half to 2 weeks after my dad died suddenly of a heart attack. And I was never interested in food. Like I remember an argument, with one of my roommates. We had our senior year, we had a dorm with a kitchen. And so each of us took turns cooking, and he was kind of into eating healthy. And I was like, I like chemicals. They taste good. Like that was me. And somehow I found myself at some bookstore, and I saw the Spine Diet for a New America. And there was no reason for me to be interested, but somehow, the universe like had the thing fall out of the shelf into my hands, and I read it. And within like 3 hours of finishing it, I had become basically a whole food plant-based vegan. And like, that was the start. I lost a bunch of weight. I got back to my high school weight because college, you know, the freshman, whatever, hadn't gone away. And I felt great. And all of a sudden, like, the whole world made sense in a new way. And I would love to say that I have been like 100% vegan, plant-based, healthy since then. But the truth is, I forgot like several times along the way. And the most recent time that I remembered was when I got to work on a book with T. Colin Campbell. And I was in South Africa at the time. And in South Africa, we were in a very rural area. And it's very easy for me to convince myself that, well, I needed to, you know, like, nothing grows here. You got to eat the lambs and the whatever. And I was working on this book that ended up being called Whole, Rethinking the Science of Nutrition, while I was really not being very vegan or plant-based at all. And I kind of didn't want to tell Colin that. And eventually, like, first of all, like, just the embarrassment of having to keep a secret from my co-author, and then reading the chapters that he was writing that I was then editing and working on, was like, holy cow, this is serious. This is real stuff. Like, I remember why that book in 1990 was so important to me. I remember why the China study in 2005 was so important to me. And I have been, you know, whole food, plant-based, vegan ever since that. So that was like 2012. So we're coming up on my 10th year anniversary of not backsliding.
So it's kind of like plant-based amnesia. Why do you think people get plant-based amnesia?
I think, well, first of all, there's not that, you know, unless we organize our environments to support our weird choices, the world is just going to, you know, drag us back down. Like, what do if you wanted me to predict someone's behavior, you know, the best way to do it is to look at the behavior of the people around them. Like, that's who we are as a species. It's a wonderful shortcut, this sort of kind of social mimicry. And if you want to go against your tribe, you're going to do it at your peril, because you're risking disapproval, you're risking some form of ostracism. So, you know, being in this world, and I wasn't really part of, you know, a plant-based pod or a community. I was just like being me out in the world, and just every day I was seeing messages, large and small, that said, this is the normal way to be. And so unless I'm actively taking steps to counter that, or creating a community or a microenvironment, I think it's very easy for us to get amnesia, to just default into the consensual reality of this consumer culture.
Do you think that we're programmed to be lazy? And
no, I think we're programmed to be efficient. I think we're programmed to not waste energy. And for most of human history, if you just did what the people around you did, that was a pretty good strategy, right? Like, oh, let me run towards where everyone else is running away from. Like, that was like a, you know, recipe for probable death, right? Like, you know, or like how humans figured out what to eat. It was probably by watching other primates. I'm like, oh, look, that chimp didn't die. I seem to enjoy those leaves. So let me try it. Right. So basically, I think human beings do very well by learning from other human beings. But when we've been overtaken by a consumer culture that's based on a very small number of people making a lot of money at our expense, I think we have to recognize that most of the messages we're getting through advertising, through mass media, through social media, they're not in our interest, right? We're getting advertised food from an industry that produces twice as many calories on average as we need, and it wants us to eat them. So we have to recognize that the game has changed. So I don't think calling ourselves lazy is helpful, but I think recognizing that there's a mismatch between our biology and our environment, and then taking active, proactive steps to counter it so we can live a good life is useful.
Culture, though, and society has changed quite a bit over the last few years. There's a lot more plant-based options out there. The science and the evidence is really coming out a lot more. Why do you think still so many people are so hesitant to make changes?
Well, I think we're all hesitant to make changes. um, I mean, like the world has foisted a lot of changes on us over the last few years. You guys are Canadian, so you're buffered from some of the worst of it, right?
Hopefully.
Kind of.
um, but like when you look at studies of like low income people, they make worse money decisions than high income people. And you think like that would be the opposite. Like they can't afford to make a bad decision to go and splurge on something when they need the money for the rent. But it turns out that when we're under stress, it's really hard to make good decisions for the long term. So I think, one of the factors of our culture is, and, I'm not going to win any friends in the capitalist system by saying this, but one of the factors that keeps the system going is people are unsure. They are uncertain. They're worried. They are insecure about their jobs, about their communities. We don't have the same kind of communal support network than we had when we had extended families all living on the same block, and spiritual or church communities that we could sort of depend on and mutual aid. And given that people are so insecure and nervous, it makes us very good impulse buyers.
I'm going to spin Adam's question a little bit. And in this insecurity and in this, in this time that we've been in and the stress that we've been in and not knowing if we have jobs and not knowing what our health is like, do you think maybe, and I think the answer is yes for the most part, but not for everybody, obviously. Do you think that people are really looking at their health more now over the past year and saying there are things that I can't control? And then there are things that I can control, and I'm going to take more of an effort to control that. Do you see that there's an influx of people jumping on the plant-based wagon in the last year and a half after what we've been through?
Yeah, I don't actually know. I mean, I can tell you like what I see, but it's anecdotal and it's certainly not based on any kind of research. But it's funny, like when the pandemic like took hold and we realized, oh, this is gonna, this is shaking us to our core. I was still part of WellStart Health, which was a telehealth basically intervention for companies to lower their health insurance premiums and their payouts by getting people to engage in lifestyle practices to get healthy. And like it was really hard for years. We were doing this and we were trying to explain to people what Zoom was and how you get on Zoom, because we're a virtual organization. Then all of a sudden the pandemic hit and we're like, oh, this is going to blow up, right? First of all, everybody's on Zoom. Second of all, the first news was who was dying was people with pre-existing conditions. So like, oh, all these people with diabetes and high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease and autoimmune disease, they're going to realize that they've got to take action now. And we're like, oh boy, we better like buy more bandwidth and upgrade the website. And like the exact opposite happened. It was like people were frozen and it was almost impossible for them to think about anything other than surviving day to day. And, I don't think that kind of this like fear-based learning doesn't really help us move forward. I think what when I look at like all the people who've made an impact in moving the plant-based movement forward, like realistically, like, it's been like, 1-2 punches. There's been doctors who are writing books about don't die. This is terrible. Don't eat these crappy foods. But there's also like Miyoko, right? Makes vegan cheese delicious. Or James Wilkes says, you can have fun and be a great athlete. Like it's sort of the positive, happy, delicious, this like approach tactics that are really drawing people in. Like, hey, don't you want this? As opposed to the fear-based of, you're going to die.
Yeah.
So for those of you who might be wondering who James Wilkes is or who Miyoko is, we will link to their shows in the show notes at planttrainers.com, 2 amazing guests that we had on as well. And I do think that there is some kind of fear. I think people do make decisions in fear, because I think that, I mean, like, we've had people say to us, oh, I read all your social media, that's great, but until I have my first heart attack, I'm not willing to give up the things that I love. Or had you had that book fallen into your lap, a year before you had experienced that with your dad, would you have held on to the information the same way? But that fear needs to be usually like internalized and individualized, and not more of a societal
Well, yeah, because
thing. Yeah.
when people come to you in fear, I know you guys, you don't respond by stoking their fear. You respond with compassion, with acceptance, with welcoming, with positivity, and with things to do. So yeah, fear, I think of fear, of a terrible thing, sort of like putting your hand on the hot stove. Like you'll pull it away. You'll do anything in that moment, but it's not, you're not going to like run away from the hot stove. Like once your hand's off, you're not going to keep moving in a direction. So what you guys do, and what John Robbins did in Diet with a New America, was present. I mean, look at the book. It wasn't, bad diet for an old America. It was forward facing. It was like, we can do better. Here's an invitation. And we're not like turning a blind eye to the negatives, but the basic orientation is towards like, here's a thing you might want. Here's something beautiful to move towards. Right. Like in, this new book called You Can Change Other People. And we talk about the importance of having an energizing outcome. If someone's coming to you with a problem, so if you try to solve the problem, the metaphor we use is like having a GPS and putting anywhere but here as the destination, right? All you want to do is get away from the problem. But whereas when you think about like, what do I want instead? Then you've got a destination. You can put in the coordinates, and you're going to start getting instructions and feedback to help you move towards it.
So one of the things that we do, and when people come on the show and ask, how do I make my husband, become plant-based too? How do I make my children do it too? And our general message is lead by example, and wait, and lead by example, keep the relationship strong, and wait. But you've got 4 steps on how you could change other people in the book. Do you want to talk about those a little bit?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. And so like, absolutely, leading by example is a great step. And it's probably in many cases a necessary one. Not in all cases. Like there's, like you may want your kid to become like a serious photographer, and maybe you don't know anything about photography, but you see that they're interested and you want to encourage them, or, to run track. Like we don't have to be a role model for everything. Around food, we don't want to be a hypocrite. We don't want to be like with, the Big Mac juices dripping down our chin while we tell them to, eat tofu.
Don't eat chocolate and you've got a big stain on your shirt.
Right. That's why I wear, dark brown.
Is that why you're always wearing that shirt, babe?
That's why.
Right. So we can't, like, as coaches, we're more than role models. Like we have processes to help people. And so what I wanted to do with the book, my co-author and I, Peter Bregman, decided why we wanted to share some of the insights that we've learned and developed as coaches, getting, like, our job is to help people change, to lay people, to enable people to have the best odds, not necessarily of changing someone in the way you want them to change, but helping them become the best version of themselves, helping them act in ways that are far more in concert with their values and their best interests. So the first step is probably the most fundamental and most powerful, which is to shift from critic to ally. Right. So a lot of, like, the people who come to you who are frustrated, like, okay, you got me, I'm eating well now. But like, my husband's a slob, my kids, my siblings, my parents, it drives me crazy. Like what I did when I, in 2005, when I, got my energy reignited around, like, I started seeing everything in the house as like that skull and crossbones. It was like, like, wouldn't you knock it out of your kid's hand if you thought they were going to, like, drink Drano. And like, that's how I was with like yogurt and, chicken nuggets and like all the stuff they were enjoying. All of a sudden, like I became this tyrant and I was highly critical of them. It's like, don't you, whatever would work, like animal rights thing. Like my kids are little, like, don't you love animals? It was insane when I look back on it, but I came at them as a critic. And there's lots of ways to come at people as critics. One is to just criticize them, to nag them. Another is to shut up and make faces and noises, right? Like I am a black belt at the leaking, disapproving look, right? That's what my kids will tell me. Like, I don't even realize I'm thinking it. And they're like, stop judging me. We can also be a critic by knowing better, right? Like if I tell you guys what to do, you know what, you guys, look, like let me tell you about what's wrong with the background of your studio here. Let me tell you, like all of a sudden you can feel like, who the hell is he to tell me what to do? And like, so if I'm coming across as I know better, and all of these approaches trigger shame. And depending on how, put together the person is emotionally, more or less shame, but any degree of shame is inhibitory. Like we human beings are wired to feel shame so that we stop what we're doing and then have time to reflect and correct. And so if you want someone to change, the last thing you want to do is inhibit motion. You want to encourage motion. So instead of being a critic, we talk about being their ally. And there's a bunch of steps that kind of, a process that we go through, because you can't just like flip the switch and say, okay, I'm your ally now. But that really is the first step, is approaching them in a way that they feel like you're on their side. You care about them. You have confidence in their ability to do what's right for them. And you are committed. You're offering to help them. So that's an ally.
It's definitely very challenging not to put judgment on things when you see them. I mean, the way you were describing how you looked at food when it was food that shouldn't be there, I think we all go through that. And it's just learning how to shift your judgment on other things or people. It's a job in itself. Like, it's not an easy thing to do. But then again, making change is not an easy thing to do if you really want to do it.
Yeah. And we don't have to like erase our judgments, right? So it's not a matter of like, if people needed to have different thoughts in order to behave differently, we'd be in trouble, right? Because I don't know about you guys, I can't control my thoughts. The day I started meditating, I realized that I cannot control my thoughts.
Have you tried tapping? Have you done any tapping?
I've done some tapping.
Yeah.
And what I can't, but I mean, it doesn't bother me that I can't control my thoughts.
Okay.
Because I can control my attention around my thoughts, and I control how much they pull me in. So it's okay. Like I actually like to start with my judgments. So if I'm looking at someone that I want to change, let's say one of my children, this is totally hypothetical if they ever listen to this. This is, this is my other children, the other family that they don't know about.
Oh, dear Lord.
No wonder.
No judgment.
No wonder I'm so tired. My Canadian family.
So you heard it here first, people. Sorry.
So I'm thinking like, oh, so I'm really judging, my son, the way he's eating. I think it's irresponsible and self-indulgent, and he's being a hypocrite. And then I feel like, oh, right, I should stop judging, right? And then the word should is in there. As in, so now I'm judging myself for judging him. And so there's a beautiful place to start. I like to start with myself and to say, okay, so I'm thinking these thoughts about him. Where's my positive intent? What do I have to care about in order to even care? And I have to care about his well-being, his health. I have to care about the planet. I have to care about animals. And so all of a sudden, like anytime anything upsets us, it's because of a positive value of ours that is being challenged in some way. And so like anytime I'm upset, like why was I upset on the road when the cars were honking? Because I like peace and quiet. So anything, any negative emotion, sensation, judgment, thought I have is predicated on caring about something, about some positive, valid need or value. And so I get in touch with that and I can feel, oh, I so want him to be healthy. I want him to lead a good life. Right? And then now I can be gentle with myself and I don't have to get rid of the judgment. It's just like, there's the judgment and I see where it comes from. So now I'm tenderized a little bit. Now I can look at him and say, what does he want? He's 21 years old, going through a tough time of life, under any circumstances, can't see his friends, can't go to school in person, wants to have this profession, but needs other people around. Like, it's really hard for him and he wants to feel good. And he's discovered that eating certain foods makes him feel good. It gives him pleasure. Like, he wants pleasure. He wants to feel good. Like, that's a positive. So all of a sudden I've taken those judgments and I've softened them with self-compassion and with compassion for another. And now is the point at which I can honorably approach him. And if I want to talk about it, I can say, hey, I notice you eating, all this stuff is, and whether he's, he might say, I don't feel good later. Like, I don't want to do this. I don't have any energy. I might say, you seem like you're out of sorts a lot. Would you like to talk about it? Right. I don't even have to mention food. I can just point out like something, that I care about and that's not going to trigger shame or defensiveness. You seem kind of tired a lot. Would you want to talk about that with me? I'd love to, would you like to think about it with me? Right. And at that point, it's much easier for him to say yes than if I say, can we talk about this garbage you're eating?
Right. Yeah, makes sense.
So what are some of the other steps in there?
All right. So the first step ends with getting permission to have a conversation. So if I say, hey, you want to think it through with me? He could say no. Because remember, we have history, right? I've messed this up a lot. And so if he says no, I have to be willing to be really okay with that. Say, okay, that's cool. If you ever change your mind, I'm here. Because that reinforces his ownership of it, his autonomy, right? Because people don't resist change per se, they resist being changed. So if he suddenly realizes, oh, he has ownership, by saying no, he's actually exercising his ownership. That would allow him, then one morning he can't get up, he's got no energy, he feels blah, and he realizes, what, eating some more junk food is not going to help. It's just digging me farther on the path. He might say, hey, yeah, can we talk about that? I am feeling tired. And at that point, I've got permission. So the second step now, and it is counterintuitive, because when you hear it, when someone says, okay, let's talk about my problem, we want to solve their problem. Right? Because we love solving problems and we think we're smart when we solve problems. And but the problem with solving problems is it's almost never the right problem. And they're still in fight or flight. So they're still in a very defensive posture. So instead, the second step is identify an energizing outcome, which is say like, oh, great. What would you like? So instead of, okay, well, let's talk about how tired you are and how achy and blah you feel and you get sick a lot. Let's talk about what life would be like if it were wonderful. What would be ideal for you? Oh, I'd love to have energy. I'd love to, right? So we want to get them to a place where they're saying something positive. And then what I like to do is attach it to their values. Like, so for the sake of what? Like, why is that important to you? Because, like as coaches, we're all trained to like get people's big why. And when I started doing this, I thought the big why was, I want to lose 50 pounds so I can, but it was always like some future thing. Cause I want to climb that mountain. I want to go on vacation. I want to dance at my daughter's wedding. And I thought that was enough. And then I started realizing like, there's something really demoralizing about a future goal. Like, yeah, we need them. They're very useful strategically, but the more stake we put into future goals, the more we realize we don't have them now. So I love that we started this conversation about gratitude, because this is the opposite of gratitude. If I'm focused on on the future goal, I'm really focused on the gap, the delta, what I don't have.
wouldn't that be one of the major reasons for like yo-yo dieting? Because you have this goal, you reach your goal and you go, okay, well, I've worked towards my goal and I haven't adopted the behaviors and I haven't felt present in the days and I haven't been proud and confident and noticed all the small things along the way. So then you go back into your old routine until you then have your next daughter's wedding or whatever it is that puts you back on track-ish.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if I want to lose 20 pounds, that's going to be sometime in the future. And I'm going to have to not eat the chocolate today, which is now. So pain now for pleasure later is not a great algorithm for human success. But instead we talk about like, why do you want, what's the value that you want to exhibit? Like, I want to be there for my daughter. I want to be present. I want to show up. I want to be connected. I want to be responsible. Like those are all values. They're not goals. You don't get to there someday. You can only enact them in the here and now. So then we can talk about like, okay, great. What would, if you were being all those things today, what would that look like? And the answer is probably not sneaking cheeseburgers, right? I want to be honest with myself. I want to be self-confident. I want to be curious. Like people always come up with good values. They never come up with values like, I want to be devious and disrespectful, right? Right. So people understand their values, and the challenge is when they articulate them is they start to realize, oh, I don't have to wait 6 months or 5 years. I can enact this value right now. This value that I had attached to the goal, I can live it in this moment. And so once you have your energizing outcome and you understand why, you kind of already have a roadmap forward.
Interesting. It's
So
a different perspective. I mean, usually we talk about setting goals, and now we're talking about shifting that to the now and what can we do differently value-wise, which is interesting.
Yeah, and I think they're both important. I think, if you
Right.
don't set a goal, it's very hard to know if you're on the right track. Like, set a weight goal, check your weight, like use that. But really it's the journey, not the outcome. Right. I mean, not the end, not the destination. Like that's what makes it worthwhile. What's the longest race you've ever run?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
50 miles, 50 mile
miles.
race. Yeah.
How long did it take you?
About 10 hours.
Yeah. So if the outcome, if the destination was the important thing, you could have just stood at the finish line and walked across it. Mm-hmm. Right. But you spent 9 hours and 59 minutes not there.
Right.
But that's what made the outcome worthwhile. Like crossing the finish line only had meaning because of the other 10 hours.
Right.
So it's funny because I was running with a friend the other day and she's like, I'd really like to run a race with you. And I'm like, I don't know if I really want to run a race. She's like, well, the only person I'd run a race with is you. And I'm like, why? So she said that 2 other people who she had run races with, who don't even know each other, made her or encouraged her because they were choosing to actually cut through on the racetrack and make the race shorter and not actually finish the 5K or the 10K, just get to the finish line. So it makes you wonder what's happening deep down inside the brain to make you want to shortcut those goals. Yeah, maybe that's a whole other conversation.
I mean, yeah, so we can certainly, you can look at malfeasance in the world, and it's almost all some shortcut based on I will be happy when I get this, as opposed to I'm going to be happy in the pursuit of this. And I suppose, I come from a family of kleptomaniacs, honestly. I have the gene.
Your Canadian family?
Yeah. No, this is my New Jersey family. Like I have the gene, like I don't act on it because I'm afraid of authority figures, but like I'll go to a restaurant and I'll see a light fixture. I'll say, how could I steal that? Like, there's definite pleasure in like me considering crime.
Right. Well, and yeah, and that can be genetic, but good for you for not acting on it.
Yeah, I don't know where this is going.
All right,
So
back to step 3. Give us step 3.
let's go through. Yeah, let
Okay.
everybody know quickly what step 3 and 4 is, and we'll let them head to the book to find out the rest of the information there.
Great. So step 3 in a nutshell is discover a hidden opportunity. Find a hidden opportunity, which is the idea is once we have an energizing outcome, we then can look at the problem from a different perspective. Because often the thing we think of as the problem, if we just solved it, it wouldn't get us to our energizing outcome. If my son just stopped eating crap, he would not immediately become like vibrant, excited, enthusiastic. Like that's sort of a symptom, right? So we can talk about like, so if eating bad food is not the problem we're trying to solve, like I could just say, hey, eat this, not that, right? And that would solve the problem. Here's some recipes, or, go to Trader Joe's and buy that stuff instead of the other stuff, right? But then if we look at like, where's the opportunity? Well, then there's a certain way he wants to be in the world in spite of a lot of emotional, unpleasantness and distress. And maybe every time he gets a craving for some food that's going to satisfy him in the short term and undercut him in the long term, he can use that as a trigger to explore who he wants to be. Like that can become the moment of like values weightlifting, right? Or we can look at, okay, if I change how I eat, that might give me enough energy to start exercising. And when I exercise, then I could go for a run in the woods, and being in nature revitalizes me and it reconnects me with what's important, right? So we're looking for, where are there opportunities? In other words, we're almost asking the question, how is the problem a good thing given what you really want? Right. So we could talk about like when Adam, when you said, get to versus have to, like that's that switch. Like, right. Oh, I get to feel a craving, right? Most people, when they come to you, are like, just make the cravings go away. Can we drown them in a bathtub, right? But then they realize, okay, well, what if the cravings never go away? What if the cravings are actually the weights that I lift in order to become the person I want to be? Then all of a sudden, the thing hasn't changed, but our attitude and our relationship to it has.
That's strong. That's good.
Yeah.
Good. Step 4.
Step 4 is the plan. So we're not just about insight. We're not just about emotional healing. We're about different action in the world. And so once there is that, here's the opportunity. Now people can generally have all this access to good ideas, to creativity. They don't need us to tell them what to do, right? The assumption is people are smart, capable, thoughtful, and there's something getting in the way of them figuring this out for themselves. And so it's not about they just don't know what I know. If they just knew what I knew, I mean, sometimes, right? Like there are situations, edge cases where people you just give them a book and they're like, oh my gosh, I never heard of this, right? In our world, that actually happens quite a lot. But when you give it to them and they're like, oh, I wish I could do this, but I can't, or I don't know about it, but I also value the pleasure of my taste buds, and I feel like I'd be a different person, or I'm going to be betraying my cultural heritage if I don't have X, Y, or Z food all the time, right? Then we're looking at, well, what's gotten in their way. And so now, like, this process gives them access to all these new suggestions, ideas, options, opportunities. And so we're going to help them come up with, what do you want to try? And the important thing is not, what do you want to try that is going to be guaranteed to work, right? We're not asking them for success. We're asking, what are you confident that you will follow through on? Because we don't care if people get it right, right? We don't care if people succeed, because we know it's an experiment. We know it's iterative. You guys have talked about this a lot. Like, we're just trying to get people to do new things and pay attention to the outcomes. And if you do that, it's automatic course correction. You'll automatically find your way onto the right path. So we're just asking for people to come up with a plan that they're willing to say, on a scale of 1 to 10, I am confident at level 10 that I am going to follow through. And if it fails, or if I fail, that is learning. That is information that I'm going to use to move forward as opposed to an excuse to stop.
There's a quote, I'm not sure who it's by, but it goes something around the lines of, there's no such thing as failure as long as you're still learning. Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's hard for us to remember that because, you know, think about the people who come to you who failed on 20 diets. They have, you know, entire bookshelves of South Beach, Sugar Busters, Atkins, and their story is, well, I'm no good at this. I can't do this. I'm weak. I have no self-discipline. I'm a sugar addict, whatever their story is. And you get them on the right track and you love them and you inspire them and you show them what to do and they're doing great. And then one day they have a slip up and their self-story just kicks back in. Oh, well, the chains, yeah, plant trainers, that was another thing that didn't work, right? It's like your most important job is to prepare them for that moment. To say the difference isn't that this is like a miracle diet. The difference is that you're going to look at it as, great, I hit a wrong note. Now I get to practice my scale.
Perspective.
It is perspective. And I mean, like there's a couple of things that we do between, you know, athletic coaching and nutrition and some other techniques and protocol that we use with people to help them heal. I'd say 90% of the time when they're already walking through our door, they're saying to us, I don't know, because nothing else has worked up till now. I've tried so many other things and nothing else has worked. And that ruins people's confidence and spark in then going ahead and trying possibly the one thing that is really, you know, going to actually help them from, you know, the root cause. But yeah, we've got like that. And that's part of our jobs as coaches is to help them see that and almost cheer them on for their failure. I mean, like one of the best things was somebody, you know, in a follow-up call, and she said, oh, it was awful. I couldn't, my back pain came back and I couldn't sleep. And I this and I this and I this and I that because we were on the road and I stopped at what's that restaurant you guys have down there? Like a Waffle House or something. And there was nothing else for me to eat. So I had a steak and everything went backwards and all my inflammation came back and I couldn't sleep flat that night and da 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 da. And I wasn't glad that she had that discomfort, but I was glad that she had that experience because that gave her the understanding of what had happened is that she actually did make progress and this was the right track. And sometimes we need those reminders too.
Yeah. And I'll bet she was braced for a scolding.
Right? I didn't have to.
No, but like we, as coaches, we like really can do jujitsu on people by celebrating those moments. Like, yeah. You know, I will go over the top. I'll say, you know, that's fantastic. I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't wish for you to feel bad, but what a great experience. What'd you learn from it? Right. What if you knew that same thing might happen in the future, what could you do differently? How could, you know, maybe a week before, a day before that moment, like, oh, that's fantastic. That's great. Because this is where the learning comes from. Right. Yeah. So I'll kind of go over the top in being delighted when people mess up. Because first of all, I want them to tell me.
Right.
Right. Like, you ever have a client cancel because they've messed up and they don't want to talk to you until they're fixed?
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't think we should meet this week because I really haven't been on schedule. And like, I get it because I'm a teacher pleaser, right? And I want to show up and I want to be praised, right? So if you think that, and they think that it's a waste, but you can really, like, that's what the coaching is for. The coaching isn't, you've hired a coach and you're perfect. You are literally working towards a goal and learning as you go and making changes as you go and being sparked to look at things in different ways so that you can, not so that I can make decisions for you or you can make decisions for your clients, but so they can make decisions for themselves. Yeah.
And you know, when we love them and when we give them unconditional acceptance, that opens up space for them to reevaluate themselves, right? Because if I'm trying to do something and I'm just beating myself up, which is how most of us have gone through trying to make these difficult changes, right? I'll look in front of the mirror, I'll make little faces with the fat around my belly button and go, "Oh, you are disgusting," like stuff that just, is just, not that I've ever done that.
Only in
But
Canada.
no, but I mean, for many years, that was my strategy. It was like, "Oh, you fat," ugh. Like that was going to motivate me. And if, I can't remember who said it, but if self-loathing motivated us, we'd all be great.
Yeah.
Right?
Change is hard to do for yourself as an individual. And now you've come along and written this book called You Can Change Other People. And it's a fascinating concept, because changing yourself is hard. How could it be easy to change somebody else? And is it even our place to make changes for other people? That's a whole other, I
Yeah.
think, conversation or twist that we could take on it. But I mean, is it really our place? I mean,
Well,
let me
yeah,
know.
I'll say this. We don't ask permission to make people miserable. Right? Like if I have a conversation with someone and they start doing things differently as a result, I've changed them. Right? Like change for me is a break from the past. So if people are stuck in old patterns and then they have a conversation with me, or they have a conversation with you, and you give them a new insight, a new perspective, and a new action plan, and they take some new action, they've changed. So what's important to me is not that I'm trying to change them in a particular direction, because if I think I know what specifically they need, then I'm coming from that place of critic, right? I am superior to them. I know I'm better than them. They are worse than they. Rather, what I want to do is foster their ownership, support their independent capability. I want to enable them to grow their emotional courage and their resilience. So like I look at them and I see their potential. And I don't know how, like, maybe they're going to become plant-based. Maybe I'm going to convince someone and they're actually going to become keto or carnivore. Like, I don't know what they're going to do with their integrity, with their agency, with their autonomy, with their ownership. But my belief is that people who are agents of their own lives are better people. They're less victimized by society. They're less victimized by their past. And so if I can be of service to someone in helping them act in their own self-interests and achieve what they want to achieve, then I do want to participate in that. And in answer to the other question about change being hard, yeah, change is very hard. And that's why we need each other. Change by ourselves is hard. One of the things I realized, like, I wrote the book and then I'm like, I'm going to try this. Here's something I want to change. I'm going to try it on myself. It didn't work. And at first I was like, uh-oh. Then I started thinking, like, yeah, like I could give this book to someone else and say, hey, do this with me. Help me. Right? Because we need each other. And in these days, we need each other more than ever.
For sure. Howie, it's always amazing talking to you. I mean, we learn so much every single time, and we're so happy that you wrote this book. It's called You Can Change Other People, the 4 Steps to Help Your Colleagues, Employees, even Family Up Their Game. And we're going to put a link to that in our show notes at planttrainers.com. If people want to reach out to you, Howie, where would you like them to go?
I got 2 websites. I've got plantyourself.com, which is the plant-based podcast website. I also have a page up at a professional website for the kind of, coaching that I can do on a health or executive basis, which is askhowie.com.
Great. So we'll link to those places in the show notes at planttrainers.com. Always a pleasure having you. Come back again for the 4th or 5th time. We'd love to have you.
Anytime. I love talking to you guys. You're such bright lights, and you embody the best of our movement. So it's always a thrill to be on the Zoom with you.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you. All right.